Chapter 13, Lecture 2, is going to really be a lot of case studies on what we're doing to our marine and freshwater systems and what we can kind of do to make it right. First of all is the whales, of course, success story so far. We've got toothed whales, we've got baleen whales. They're an easy target because their migratory patterns are well known, and also they're huge creatures that need to come to the surface to breathe. So a lot of nations are actually using airplanes to find these things. In 1946, it was established the International Whaling Commission, also known as the IWCC, and the idea of this commission was to monitor the amount of whales and to keep them at a healthy level. In 1970, the United States said, forget it, we're done. We stopped all commercial whaling, banned all imports of whale products. In 1986, there was even a moratorium on commercial whaling. However, there are nations like Japan, Norway, Iceland, and Russia, and keep in mind that they use these whales for food, are still whaling and taking and reducing especially the blue whale population because of so-called research purposes. We know they're eating it. Another example is the case study of marine turtles. Huge threat to leatherback sea turtles, as you can see in the picture on the right. What's really getting these things are trawlers. Trawlers, of course, the type of fishing that drags the bottom. Catching these things, these creatures drowned in them. Of course, they're another sea creature that needs to come to the surface to get oxygen. Pollution is getting these things, a lot of runoff from areas around the ocean. Climate change is affecting these things. We really need to protect these turtles, and there's a lot of organizations, things like this club and just community-based organizations that are really helping a lot. We really need to establish a global network of marine reserves. A lot of other nations are far ahead of the United States for this. There's something called the World Conservation Union, and that is to protect marine species. There's currently 90 marine reserves in the world, largest of which is in Australia. The United States has one down in the Florida region, I believe, but it's not very big. The idea of this is it's completely closed. It's a huge area of the ocean, completely closed to commercial fishing. Can't dredge there, can't mine, can't put waste out in the ocean like garbage. There's a core area where there's no human activity allowed, so we just let nature be nature and take care of itself. And with ideas like this, fish populations just skyrocket. It's much less harmful. We don't allow harmful activities. We don't allow recreation boating. We don't allow shipping. Shipping would drop anchors in these regions, anything like that. So it's a real core area that's protected for these fish. Fully protected marine species do work fast, as I said. The fish populations tend to double very quickly. Fish size grows, reproduction triples, species diversity increases by almost 1/4. So really the species are not very stressed really well. Kind of a cool little thing in the Middle Eastern region, I believe this is, Israel, is an artificial coral reef. It's actually a restaurant named the Red Sea Star, created by Reuven Yosef, which is really to bring about an awareness of our environment, especially in the oceans. What he works on is, with this restaurant, of course, you can walk around and see all the different fish and the coral, and the idea of reconciliation, ecology, so let's make things right. We can all do our little part. And what they're doing is even treatment of broken coral with antibiotics to try to get them right. So again, this is an undersea restaurant built above and then sunken down onto a substrate structure, and of course you can really appreciate what's going on around eating. Managing the world's fish populations in 2007 with the World Trade Organization, which proposed a ban on fishing subsidies. In other words, why pay people to do it? They're just artificially making more money. Populations are really hard to measure. We need to use realistic limits. The ocean is so huge, we don't know how many fish are out there exactly. So it's really hard to estimate. So setting up limits is really hard to do. There was a really good idea called the individual transfer quotas. A lot of European nations jumped aboard this. It's called the ITQs, where they limited their commercial fishermen and private fishermen and how many fish they can bring in, what seasons they can bring in. It did reduce illegal fishing on the high seas and coastal waters. There's some negatives to this individual transfer quota. A lot of the small fishermen, a lot of the private ones oftentimes were driven out because the big companies actually got more of the fish. So it kind of gives them a quota, and that quota really is established on how many fish they think is out there so we don't overwhelm their populations. Consumer choices can help pertain or help sustain fisheries and aquatic biodiversity. So what you buy actually can actually influence this. If we're not buying products, then there's no reason to catch them, which means they can be left in the oceans. In 1997, there was a Marine Stewardship Council called the MCS in London, and it really supports sustainable fishing. So it really is the idea that you should only buy fish from companies or even private interests that actually practice the sustainability and really practice that ITQ model. Otherwise, we're contributing to the decline of the fish species. Wetlands. Wetlands, just like freshwater wetlands, coastal wetlands are incredibly important. They're very highly protective areas. They provide natural flood erosion control. They maintain high water quality. They're natural filters for water. They protect us from storms. The effect of sea rising is really kind of affect things. And with wetlands, what we're seeing is, of course, people love to live by the water and the ocean, so we're filling those in. We're doing farming on them. We can do something called mitigation banking, which is if you destroy wetlands in one area, you can build it someplace else. But really, that's not a good idea. Nature built it as is for a reason, and trying to replicate it's really not that good at all. Big case study is down in Florida. Down in Florida, if you take a look at one region called Lake Okeechobee right here. At one time, there was a free-flowing meandering system that went all the way down to the Everglades. It was called the River of Grass in southern Florida. What happened is in 1948, they started damaging that. Of course, the population of Florida went up. Great area to grow food year-round. It was drained. It was diverted. Basically, what they did was they straightened this out, and by straightening it out, it made the water go faster from these swampy areas. So it actually dried that farmland out. We also got a lot of nutrients coming in from these areas right here. They're farming and from cities. And what happens is those nutrients go right down into the Everglades. And of course, that grows, it eutrophies, and it chokes out the natural waterways. We get a lot of invasive species with this too. In 1947, the Everglades National Park tried unsuccessfully to protect and get this project really fixed. And it just really isn't the same ever since then. What's happening is a lot of political haggling on this, is we're seeing the Keys actually drying up. We're losing a lot of species down there. That water that naturally flew from the Okeechobee Lake at one time fed the Everglades, and now a lot of birds especially are disappearing. The U.S. Corps of Engineers really began restoration. In 1990, the Comprehensive Everglade Restoration Project, known as CHIRP, tried to restore the curving flow of most of the Kissimmee River that goes from the Okeechobee River down to the Keys, but we can't replicate nature. It's as simple as that. They've removed canals and levees that straighten things out. Initially, they flooded a lot of farmland to create artificial marshes and things like that, but it's not working. It's kind of one of those better prevention is the best thing to do, precautionary principle. They created reservoirs, underground water storage areas, build new canals, reservoirs, efficient pumping systems, and keep in mind that in this region too, Florida's kind of sinking a little bit because we're withdrawing so much groundwater out that we're creating even things like sinkholes down there because you're taking away volume. Water is a very precious even down there. Great Lakes, of course, we're very familiar with this, largest body of water, fresh water in the world, all of them together, I should say. About 162 native species are in there, everything from sea lamprey, zebra mussel. The good of the zebra mussel, of course, is it does filter out inland lakes like Pewaukee Lake, but the bad thing is it takes nutrients away from other species. Quagga mussel is actually outcompeting the zebra mussel right now. They're bigger. So the zebra mussel's on the decline, which is a good thing, I guess. We've got the Asian carp, among many other things, havoc on us. Another little case study that's really interesting is the Columbia River system, which is in Washington State. The Columbia River is right in this region right here, and you can see it branches off. There's lots of, there it leads up into there. It's excellent for salmon, and remember, salmon return to where they're born in order to lay their eggs. The problem is, we also have a lot of people that live here, and we like electricity, so they like to dam these up. With the dam system, they can create hydropower, which is a really good source of energy. However, what happens is it prevents the salmon from going back to where they were born and going up naturally the system. So it's screwed everything up. Salmon can't reach their breeding grounds. Salmon, by the way, once they lay eggs and then they're fertilized, the male and female both die. And they're even seeing effects, which is kind of talked about here, that bears aren't getting the food because they're not dying, they're not getting up there, so the bear population's decreasing. When they die, they naturally decompose along the river system, and then the plants use that along the river system, along the riparian area in order to grow. And what happens is we're not seeing that, so that's getting cut now too, and then we have lack of trees. So we have lack of trees. Now what happens is the water gets too warm for the eggs to develop in the first place. So in 1980, they came up with the Northwest Power Act. Now it's a good thing because it does restore power to this area, and it also puts steps in for the salmon to go into or up and try to respawn. So it's kind of a good thing. It'd be best actually to remove all the dams. All right, that's it for chapter 13.